Hey everyone, Miguel here. Today we're taking a look at a watch that might feel a little familiar because I've actually reviewed this model before, just in a different dial color. But this one right here is a Seiko SSK049, and I've got to say this version brings a completely different vibe to the lineup. Before we get into it, I do want to give a quick shout out to my friends over at GQ Jewelers in San Diego, California for loaning in the watch for the channel. Always appreciate the support. I'll leave their information below so you can go show them some love. Now this watch is part of Seiko's Presage Cocktail Time GMT collection, and this particular model is inspired by the Silver Bullet cocktail. If you see my previous review, you already know this line is all about dial work, and once again, Seiko absolutely delivers here. The retail on this piece is $625 and I think it's priced just right. The first thing that immediately stands out, of course, is the dial. You're getting this really clean silver tone finish with a press pattern that adds a ton of texture and depth. Under certain lights, it almost looks like the dial is shifting, which gives it a very dynamic look on the wrist. It's one of those watches that looks good in photos, but even better in person. You also get that signature GMT hand finish in a deep blue and shaped like a cocktail glass, which ties in perfectly into the theme of the watch. On top of that, the gold tone seconds hand adds just a bit of warmth and contrast, which I think was a really nice touch. It keeps the watch from feeling too monochromatic. Another detail I like is the 24-hour scale on the dial. Instead of going with something bold or sporty, Seiko uses a more elegant cursive style-like font that fits the overall dressy aesthetic of the watch. It's subtle, but it works really well with the design, and I love that they chose to go with this blue. Now getting into the specs of the watch, the case comes in at 40.5 millimeters in diameter, about 12.8 millimeters thick, and roughly 47.5 millimeters from lug to lug. On my 6 and 7/8 inch wrist, this watch wears really well. It sits nicely, it doesn't feel oversized, and it has a really balanced presence overall. It's one of those watches that you can throw on and not really think about throughout the day, it just works. The case itself is stainless steel, the polishing does a nice job of catching the light. However, I would have liked to see some pronounced brushing surfaces on the case as well to give the case more dynamism. Overall, the finishing is okay, it's not over the top, but it's definitely well executed for the price point. On top of the case, you've got that box-shaped Heartlix crystal, which gives the watch a bit of vintage feel. I've always liked this design choice from Seiko because it adds character, even though it's not sapphire. That said, I'll touch more on that later when I get into dislikes. Inside the watch, you're getting Seiko's 4R34 automatic GMT movement. This movement beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, has 24 joules, and offers around 41 hours of power reserve. It's what I consider a very solid, reliable movement, nothing groundbreaking, but it gets the job done, and it does it well. This is also what's known as an office-style GMT, meaning you can track a second time zone using the GMT hand, but you're not independently adjusting the local hour hand. Still, at this price point, it's a really nice complication to have, and it adds some extra functionality to the watch. Flipping the watch over, you do get an exhibition case back, which is always a nice touch. It gives you a view of the movement inside, and while it's not heavily decorated, it's still cool to see in action. Now let's talk about the strap. This one comes on a dark blue leather strap with a deploying clasp. Visually, I think it pairs well with the dial and keeps that dressy cocktail-inspired look intact, but it's also not anything special. Personally, I would probably upgrade this strap to a higher quality leather strap or even experiment with something a bit more unique to really elevate the overall feel of the watch. The good thing is that the watch has a lot of versatility, so swapping straps can completely change the look. Now in terms of how it wears day to day, as I mentioned earlier, it fits really nicely on my 6 and 7/8 inch wrist. It has a comfortable presence, and because of the case size and lug to lug distance and the 20 millimeter lug width, it doesn't feel too large or too small. It kind of hits that sweet spot where it works for a wide range of wrist sizes. Alright, so let's get into the likes and dislikes, and I'm going to keep this consistent with my previous review since a lot of it still applies here. Starting with the likes, the dial is easily the highlight of this watch. Seiko just continues to knock it out of the park when it comes to dial design in the Presage lineup. The texture, the finishing, and the way it interacts with the light, it really sets this watch apart from a lot of other options in this price range. I also really like the overall design and concept. It's a GMT, but it doesn't try to be a sporty tool watch. Instead, it leans into a more elegant, dressy direction, which makes it stand out. And of course, having that GMT functionality at this price point is always a big plus. Now for the dislikes. The main one for me is the Harlex Crystal. I understand why Seiko uses it, but at this price point, I do think Sapphire would have been a better choice. The strap, like I mentioned earlier, is another area where I think there's room for improvement. It works, but upgrading it would definitely take this watch to the next level. Another area where I would like to see some improvement is the water resistance. 50 meters is okay for a dress watch, but 100 meters would be ideal. And finally, while the movement is reliable, it's not something that's going to blow you away in terms of performance or specs, but again, it keeps a watch accessible. Overall, I think the Seiko SSK049 is a really solid option if you're looking for a more refined, dressy GMT with a standout dial. Even though I've reviewed this model before in a different color, this one definitely feels fresh and brings its own personality to the table. And honestly, this might end up being my favorite version of it so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so always be safe out there and stay humble.